Here we go. All right. Good morning and welcome everybody to the Never Stop Healing podcast. This is your host of the day, Cade Archibald, and really excited to be joined today by the one and only Regan Archibald. Regan, how you doing today?
Doing awesome.
Awesome. Well, we had a really cool Health Accelerator class last night.
Yeah.
Went over some really cool stuff, and we touched on some of the different challenges that we've been working on, as well as some of the habits that we're hoping you guys have kept in. We did our initial 60-day reset the beginning of the year, and now we're on the recharge phase, and so hoping everybody's following through with those habits and also with the spirit of essentialism. It's kind of the theme that I've got out of the recharge. So some really cool stuff there. So if you're not a part of the hack community, the Health Accelerator challenges, go to acueastwest.com/hack. We'll post that in the chat box as well for those of you joining us live. So make sure you check that out. Well, let's jump in. So Regan, how's it going today?
The day is great. And today we're going to be jumping into some more longevity things, but we're going to be talking about coffee. And so I know a lot of you have asked questions. What about coffee? Is it good for me? Is it not? There's Cade's coffee right there. Cade's enjoying it.
Ready to go to the oil fields, as my wife would say.
The oil fields?
With my thermos.
Oh yeah.
I just like it in there because I don't have to worry about it going cold if I don't drink it fast enough.
Yeah. No. So today we're going to talk about common mistakes people make when they consume coffee. We'll talk about medical breakthroughs that will influence better brain health by balancing neurotransmitters. So we'll take a deep dive into some of the ways you can really enhance your coffee experience, and then we'll also talk about how to optimize brain function without stimulants. So, Cade, because what happens if you put too many stimulants in the brain?
It gets fried.
It can go sideways quick. And then we'll talk about different peptides that are unlocking new frontiers in medicine for conditions neurodegenerative related. So when you think of neurodegeneration, that's like dementia, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and then we'll dive into a topic that I love called nootropics. So we've got some fun things for you today. But first of all, how many of you drink coffee and love coffee?
Yeah.
All right. So
I enjoy my coffee for sure.
Yes, and coffee is pretty darn amazing. Over 90% of the world's population consumes coffee. It's the second largest commodity that's traded in the world. Isn't that crazy? Second largest commodity in the world.
That is wild.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of coffee, if you think about where it came from, supposedly there's a goat herder in Ethiopia. So my favorite coffee, it comes from Ethiopia. It's the pea berry. Ethiopian blends are amazing. That coffee is just smooth. It's fruity. It's got a nice flavor to it. But supposedly there's a goat herder, and he noticed that when the goats ate these berries off of this tree, essentially kind of like a shrub, they found that these goats wouldn't sleep at night. And the goat herder was like, what are they doing? And then he introduced that to some of the people. He said, well, look, these goats get this enormous influx of energy when they eat these beans. And essentially they named it, these coffee beans, this fruit off of a tree. And so the goat herder tried it, and he noticed he got an enormous amount of energy. And then coffee just took off in the area. And one of the areas that it hit in the biggest was in India and in parts of China, where the monks who were meditating, they said, oh, coffee helps us meditate with greater clarity. And so I'm sure coffee kept them from falling asleep when they're meditating. And so that's where the coffee came from. So kind of interesting if you think about it. And it's not, we haven't been using it that long.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting. So, so they would use it when they're for meditation, or just to like stay awake, or what was?
Yeah, no, they would use it to create more clarity in their meditation.
Love that.
And they found that, wow, this is a really, if you think about it, like it's pretty darn innocuous, caffeine. You don't want to go over 400 milligrams. And so be careful. You can overconsume caffeine, and we're going to talk about how it can really fatigue your brain. But the average adult intake of caffeine among men is about 260 milligrams, which is pretty interesting. Females average about 110 milligrams. So men drink more than twice as much caffeine than women do. And the majority of that is from coffee, but you can get it from other sources, obviously. The interesting thing is, once you get over about 400 milligrams, that caffeine actually is going to have a massive diminishing return. And even I find that most people's adrenal glands these days can't tolerate more than about 200 milligrams. So dudes out there, you may want to slow your roll a little bit. And that's about 2 cups of coffee is what you're looking at. But if you have too much, caffeine is an antioxidant, and that's why you can put it on your skin and you can put it on your hair, and it makes things, kind of stay fresh and keeps you from having as much sun damage. It's an antioxidant in your body as well, but it's also a stimulant. And stimulants, as we know, they can draw from one side of the brain and fuel another side, and they can lead to some pretty damaging side effects like energy crashes. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. You can also notice that you get jittery, and jitteriness from coffee is actually a sign of something deeper going on in your body, which is an adrenal fatigue symptom. If you can't tolerate caffeine at all and you just feel really kind of out of sorts on it, then I'm not saying go and get yourself, tolerant to caffeine, but there's actually some real benefits that can happen, not only with the short chain fatty acids, but you can also give your cortisol levels a nice little gateway and balance. If you drink coffee a little later, about 2 hours after you wake up is an ideal time. So if you wake up at 5:30, a good time to drink your coffee is around 7 or 7:30 as your cortisol levels start to go down, because coffee can actually help create neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, noradrenaline, epinephrine, and then the caffeine in coffee can also help stimulate dopamine. So you get that nice dopamine rush. And in some of the happiest countries, Cade, do you ever follow like what the happiest countries are in the world? Do you track that at all?
I don't necessarily track it, other than the info that you share with me.
Okay.
So that's how I
just trust my word on it.
Yep.
Well,
never actually researched and verified you're telling me the truth, but
well, and I'm just trusting a survey, right? So
yeah.
But I've been to these countries because I like to see, okay, well, if it's one of the happiest countries on the planet, it's a place I want to visit. The last thing you want to do when you go on vacation is be around a bunch of grumpy people who are jerks. And so Sweden, and Finland and Denmark and Norway, these Scandinavian countries always top the list of the happiest countries in the world. Interestingly enough, they also drink some of the highest quantities of coffee in the world. Italy, if you go to Italy, that's another very happy country, ranks high, and they are the inventors of the espresso machine. And so espresso, kind of, if you look at the terminology, it means to compress the coffee and compress it into a nice express version of a little espresso, and they sip on that pretty much all day long. And if you've ever been to Europe, they have much smaller quantities of coffee. And in the United States, we drink it by like the gallon in some cases. Like I don't even know what the Starbucks version of large is. I think it's like Venti, or I don't know their terminology.
I can't remember. I think it is Venti.
Yeah, congratulations, Starbucks, on being so novel that we can't. I'm never, I try to avoid it, but yeah, those large quantities of coffee may not be the best thing. So today, what we hope to do is debug a lot of the myths that are out there. And so, Linda says, what does caffeine do to the stomach? Is there negative side effects in that regard? So caffeine and some of the tannins in caffeine can can disrupt the stomach acids, and coffee tends to be pretty acidic in nature. And so so sometimes you can get a little bit of acid reflux if you don't have the proper hydrochloric acid secretion. And this is where just drinking straight black coffee, you can determine if your stomach gets upset by it. If you have a dairy sensitivity, don't add the half and half, but sometimes by adding some fats into the coffee, like some ghee, which has the proteins removed that most of us have reactions to, like the casein, can help settle the stomach. But even putting like some heavy cream, which is, once again, if you have a dairy sensitivity, that it might still upset your stomach. But by adding some nice bone broth, which we talked about last night in our hack, or adding in some collagen peptides to your coffee, can actually help create a little better balance in that introduction of just some, pretty acidic natured fluid into your body. So try that. But yes, Linda, it would indicate that there are some issues with your hydrochloric acid and pancreatic enzymes. We also see people who have H. pylori infections. So look at your labs, look at your neutrophils. If they tend to be elevated, but you don't notice any kind of infections, you might have a little bit of H. pylori in the stomach. And then the other thing you can look at is your alkaline phosphatase, because if you have the H. pylori infection, that can impact the tissue degradation and give rise to higher levels of zonulin, the lipopolysaccharides, which will show up in your alkaline phosphatase. Nancy says, I love Rise mushroom coffee. Go to risesuperfood.com. That's awesome. I love putting the mushrooms in the coffee too.
I don't think I've ever tried Rise.
Yeah, I've tried it a couple of times, but it's a go-to. I use the Four Sigmatic a lot.
Yeah, I've done a lot of this Four Sigmatic. I'm gonna have to look into Rise. Thanks for that, Nancy.
Yeah, now we got Laird Hamilton. I mean, his superfood creamer is awesome. And then Ruth, hey Ruth, Ruth said, what about coffee fruit concentrate as a neurofactor in nootropics? Yes, coffee fruit is one of my favorites because what they found is, just so you guys, in case you're not familiar with how coffee's processed, it comes from coffee beans. They're picked and harvested, and they're set out either in the sun or in a kiln to essentially get roasted. The lighter roasted the coffee is, the coffee will tend to have more caffeine in it, and but there's a fruit around the coffee that gets taken out where you get the bean out of that fruit, and the coffee fruit, it has some amazing properties to help stimulate brain-derived nootropic factors. And so neurofactor is I believe Ruth, you're referring to it's by Designs for Health. Intergenius, we have coffee fruit concentrate. So you can just look at coffee bean extract, coffee fruit extract. It does have about 7% of that per milligram of coffee. So it's got a very tiny amount of coffee in the coffee fruit concentrate, or of caffeine in the coffee fruit concentrate. So you do not want to take that at night. Yes, there is some caffeine in it, Ruth, but it's very small amounts. I was talking to one of our acupuncturist, Heather, yesterday, And I just noticed Heather's always got a pot of coffee brewing or some French press going. And French press is, by the way, one of my favorites. But as I was chatting with her, I was like, so I noticed you drink coffee all day long. And I said, I love coffee. You must love it more than I do. And she said, oh yeah, I drink it all day long. And I said, when do you drink your last cup? And she said, 9:30 at night. And I'm like, how's your sleep? And she said, my sleep's great. So some people, so be careful, because it's typically not recommended, because some people are very fast metabolizers of caffeine. And if you do your 23andMe, you'll see on your genetic report, I tend to be kind of a medium metabolizer of caffeine. And so my latest ever that I drink it is around 2 p.m. And even if I drink it past noon, I notice that I get a little bit, I don't sleep as deep. And so I find that it's better to, maybe stop my caffeine consumption around noon. And I tend to do best on 1.5 to 2 cups of coffee a day. And so, so be careful. The timing of caffeine is absolutely critical. And Diane asked, what's the name of the superfood creamer? Yeah, so Laird Superfood, and he's got some powders, these mushroom blends. And the other thing that they've done is they've created, Laird Hamilton is, he's the world famous surfer. He was the first one to do the big waves. And if you read The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler, one of my favorite books of all time, it talks about Laird Hamilton, being behind these jet skis and these massive walls of like 60 foot of wave. You have to get a lot of momentum to catch the wave. And then Laird Hamilton was, one of the first surfers to actually tackle those. He grew up in Hawaii and just an amazing human, really incredible athlete. But he's now created these coffee blends that have lion's mane or chaga or turkey tail. And I love the Laird Hamilton coffee. It's great. And then he's got these superfood creamers that you can put in that's primarily coconut based. So you get some of those medium chain triglycerides, and that's phenomenal. So yeah, check that out, Diane. I think you're going to love it. It will just enhance your coffee experience. Ruth said, I find most nootropics to have many ingredients, and the odds of all will be beneficial for a person. It's a great point, Ruth, because if you throw too many things at it, I give my kids nootropics before they go to school. And I have one of my sons, Dominic, who, Cade knows well. And you guys probably heard me talk about him and my other kids on there. So Dominic, today I gave him some alpha consciousness. And that's a nootropic that one of the primary things that it does is it helps to create better dopamine supplies for the prefrontal cortex, because he tends to do better on nootropics that speed things up because he's got a little bit of ADD. And so it's interesting because by speeding that up, it actually allows him to focus on thoughts longer instead of going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And so, yes, but with him, he wanted to take like 3. He wants to take all of them. And he says, I feel really good on 1. Can I take 2 or 3 or 4? And I'm like, no.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, it sounds similar to Cade, who if 1's good, 2 must be better. So
yes, 4 will be 4 times as good.
Yeah. So to your point, Ruth, what I find is based on the different activities of the day, you want to use different nootropics to influence the neurotransmitters that you need. So if you're really want to work on projects that need more creativity, then I'll do some of the serotonin precursors. I will do more GABA. That way I'll use Selank, the nasal spray. If I want more like just kind of focused in, then I'll use the Cmax nasal spray if I'm really need to produce something. And then I'll always use lion's mane. Lion's mane is a very stabilizing nootropic. It's a mushroom blend, but it helps fuel the brain in ways that most things don't. I also like the Jerusalem artichoke. which is phenomenal. And so, Diane, we're going to jump into what nootropics are and what classifies them in just a second. So we'll jump into all the definitions. And then Ruth, 5-HTP is amazing. The hydroxytryptophan, that's great to take at night. I love taking 5-HTP with valerian, some chamomile, and then L-theanine and magnesium. And that's my favorite sleep aid. And then I'll do some melatonin intermittently as well. So yes, and that can be, I think one of the best ways to improve your brain health is a silly old thing called sleep. And, you can't nootropic your way out of bad sleep. And then you can't nootropic your way out of no exercise. So yes. Okay, Ruth, you got it down. Yeah, you're taking most of those before bed. So that's
nice.
That's critical. Yeah, love it. And Ruth, I'm so excited to meet you. Ruth's going to be coming out and hanging out with us, Cade. So you're going to have to come up to Salt Lake when Ruth's here.
Killer.
Yes. So let's, just circling back to coffee some, there's some things you want to look at. Cade, have you ever drank, I know you don't want to talk about your urine today, but it's really important that we have a case study here. And so have you ever noticed that you drink a cup? What?
I'm used to it.
So have you ever noticed when you drink a cup of coffee and your urine just smells kind of like weird, like nutty or?
Yeah, so it's hard to identify the flavor or the smell, but yeah, yes, that is happened.
Yes. So it's interesting because when you can smell a heavy aroma in the coffee, there's a good chance that there's some mycotoxins in it. And so it's not always, but you want to really be careful about where you get your coffee. So I know when you're on an airplane and it seems like all they serve is Starbucks, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but it's not the safest, healthiest coffee. The way they roast it. In fact, in California, you can look and you'll find out on the label that it can be carcinogenic. The quantities that you have to consume to get to the carcinogenic threshold of coffee is pretty high. But looking at the fair trade, the organic coffees are going to be really critical. I like the Keon coffee that Ben Greenfield makes. I find that to be pretty balanced. And then, like I said before, I like the Ethiopian pea berry organic coffee. Pink Elephant's one of my favorite roasters. And then you can also find some incredible stuff if you're, just find a local brewer or local roaster that is not overdoing it on the coffee. So here's what happens as you drink coffee. I can share this study with you, and maybe it'd be helpful if I share my screen real quick for this slide, Cade, for the video. But did we have a question that came in while I'm?
It was just a sidebar. But yeah, when we were brought up urine, Ruth had a funny comment about a podcast speaking about urine therapy that was really interesting. So nice. Maybe not something to bring up here.
We can circle back to urine therapy. In my Chinese medical training, we used to have to smell armpits and we'd have to smell urine. That was part of our diagnostic tools.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Then you can say, okay, you can kind of predict what imbalances are going on. I mean, and I won't go on too big of a riff on this. We could do a whole podcast on olfactory senses and diagnosis. But 2,000 years ago, they didn't have a stethoscope. They didn't have MRIs or weren't X-rays. How did they understand so much about physiology? Well, part of that is they were, doing dissections. If you broke the law, then you suddenly became medical territory. And so you could literally just cut someone open who's alive in the Eastern culture. It was no big deal. They're going to die anyway. So let's do some medical research on them.
Test it out.
Yeah, which is pretty inhumane. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But then they would also learn that there's different patterns and correlations that would be impacted by the way someone smells. So you can, if you go into a dialysis center, or any of my patients that I've had who have been on dialysis, they have a very kind of uriny, kind of almost putrid-like smell, right? You talk to someone who's in liver failure and they've got kind of a rancid, almost like, rotting flesh smell. And then like someone who's diabetic or who eats a lot of sugar, they have almost like a yeasty sweet smell, right? I mean, so it's not that hard to see how the diagnosis fits in. And please don't ask me to smell your armpits next time you're in the clinic. I just had to do
I'm
it
going
to
to
pass
take you
my
up
boards.
next time I'm at your house, Reagan. You're smelling my pits.
Yeah, and then you're like, and here's my fresh urine. Can you tell me what's going on? But that's how they would diagnose what they called wasting and thirsting disorder. Is if you smelled sweet in the urine, then you'd know, okay, well, they've got diabetes. It wasn't named.
They didn't have that name back then.
No, but then the treatment was pig pancreas. Isn't that interesting? Because you're going to get a lot of
really
insulin.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they said, oh, we can save lives. They just need to eat the pig pancreas. And so pretty darn interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
All these fun facts you guys never wanted to know. You get it right here on this show.
Hey, and Ruth asked a question before, said referring to asparagus. So what, and I know we're way off topic, but I like it anyways.
That's my favorite way to.
When your urine smells funky with asparagus?
Yeah, so asparagus has a molecule. It's actually a protein. It's an amino acid strain, I should say, called asparagine, and it's essentially a scrub brush for the kidneys. And so one of the nice things that asparagine is doing is it's helping resolve some of the uric acid that gets, that can help in the protein metabolism, but it can help facilitate a uric acid and protein metabolism. So it enhances uric acid. So you're smelling a combination of both of those. That's where if you have gout and you eat a bunch of asparagus, you may get a flare-up.
You're going to get a flare-up from it.
But,
all right.
And remember, gout is insulin resistance. So if you have gout, you've got to treat the insulin resistance first, and then you'll start reversing gout. So anyway, so let's go back to coffee real quick.
All right, coffee.
This is, I think it's important because we have so many of our amazing members who, we love coffee, but if you have issues with your adrenal glands, we may ask you to cut back on it. We always ask you to add L-theanine to your coffee, 100 to 200 milligrams, which we'll talk about in a minute. That's really helpful. Then you're going to need to add more, your sodium levels, your magnesium and potassium can get disrupted if you're drinking coffee and not staying hydrated. And that can be very hard to turn around. So make sure you're getting your minerals in there. But here's a study where they found that essentially 8 ounces of coffee equals about 100 milligrams of caffeine. And so what they found is 1 cup per day in this finding. This is where it was published in Gastroenterology, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, and the Wall Street Journal put all these studies together and found this reference that I think you'll find interesting. So if you drink 1 cup of coffee a day, you're going to lower your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 7%. This is according to the review of 18 studies covering 500,000 people. Even a half a cup a day habit can be enough to cause withdrawal symptoms. So here's the caveat. And there's going to be no withdrawal symptoms if you're using L-theanine, is what we found. If you use L-theanine, some fatty acids in your coffee, having a balanced diet, you should not wake up and need coffee. That's the worst time to drink coffee, is when you feel like you have to have coffee. Anyone who has to have coffee, I know they've got a neurotransmitter imbalance, and coffee's just fueling that. So this is, we're giving you some, hopefully it's some advice that makes sense here, or some insights on coffee.
But I'm just curious. So they found half a cup, like someone that just has a half a cup a day, they can go through withdrawals if they don't have that half a cup.
Yeah, and I'm skeptical.
That just seems like so minuscule.
Yeah, I'm super skeptical of that, because there can be some withdrawals from caffeine, but usually that would be in people who are super anxious and their adrenal glands are already revved up. So they've got a short in their engine, and you don't want to, there's kindling for the fire, and you just poured gasoline on it.
Yeah.
2 cups per day lowered the risk of committing suicide. Remember, I said the happiest countries in the world are the countries that consume the most coffee. And those are some of those Scandinavian countries that we referenced earlier. But they found that it lowered the risk of committing suicide by 60% in a 10-year study of 86,000 women. So kind of interesting. It can also cause anxiety, jitters, upset stomach if you're drinking 2 cups of coffee. Once again, if it's causing these things, you've got to look at the quality of the coffee. And that's where if you're doing the Folgers in your cup, or if you're waiting in line to spend a fortune on a cup of coffee from Starbucks, I always think it's interesting when I go by and I see like lines of cars, people waiting 30 minutes for a cup of coffee. I'm like, it can cost you like 30 cents if you just make it at your house, do a nice French press. And it's going to be healthier for you. But
French press is way better anyway.
Yeah, way better for you. But yeah, so 3 cups of coffee can cut the risk of gallstones by 20%. So one of the things in Chinese medicine that coffee does is it moves the qi. So the liver, there's a condition called liver qi stagnation, and that's where your energy is just not moving in your body. And we've all felt that, where we're like, I'm super irritated and agitated. I don't know why. You kind of get stiff. You wake up in the morning and you feel kind of like stuffy and groggy. That's liver qi stagnation. It's also a mitochondrial cell danger response. And so when you drink coffee, what it does is it activates the liver, because now you've got all these polyphenols that come into the liver, and your liver's got to metabolize those. So it starts moving the bile, and that bile is how you can break down fats. And that's one of the reasons why if you add butter to your coffee, or some coconut oil, some medium chain triglycerides, you can really get some powerful bile secretion and movement in your gallbladder, because gallstones are not something to be taken lightly. So pretty interesting on that. They also found that more than 2 cups doubled the risk of miscarriage in a study of 1,000 pregnant women in San Francisco. So once again, if you're pregnant, talk to your doctor about this. We do not, your adrenal glands are already on overload because of the amount of hormones your body's producing. So make sure you stick to a couple cups of coffee a day if you're pregnant. And this is where L-theanine becomes really critical, because your brain needs that calming impact instead of that rush from the coffee. So sorry, pregnant ladies, I know you're not sleeping well, especially if you're in the 8th month and there's no comfort in the joints and the connective tissue. All right, 4 cups. So 4 cups, you can reduce your risk of stroke by 43%. This was in women who have never smoked in a study of 83,000 nurses. It also cut the risks of type 2 diabetes by 25% to 35% in a review of 18 other studies. Amazing, right? Okay, 5 cups, here we go. It's getting a lot. Have you ever drank 5 cups of coffee in a day, Cade?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah, some days when it's like there's no time to get lunch, and it's like, well, how about I put I'll drink some bone broth and coffee.
Double up on coffee and protein.
Yeah, it's drink more coffee, do dumb things faster. Is that get to the end of the day? Well, I did a lot of things, but I don't know that I did anything. Yeah, so 5 cups of coffee, it lowered the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 65% in 1,400 middle-aged Finns. Remember, the Finnish people, they also spend a lot of time in the sauna. They do cold exposure. So there's, once again, this is not just bulletproof science, but it's interesting to see some correlations here. They found that the equivalent amount of caffeine reversed signs of Alzheimer's in lab mice. So if you have a pet mouse, give them the equivalent of 5 cups of coffee every day for your pet mouse. So
yeah, you'll save their brain. That's perfect.
Save their brain. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go finally the 6th cup of coffee. These are crazy. This is the hardcore coffee drinkers. They got the pot brewing all day. I have some patients. I'm like, so how much coffee you put? 2 pots a day? Is that like, what is that? So 2 pots a day. I mean, that takes a lot of intention just to get that much in. But what they found is it lowered the risk of advanced prostate cancer in a 20-year study of 50,000 men. So in general, coffee can be super helpful for you if you do it right. So yeah, so be careful on what you're doing. But here's the thing with caffeine is it can block the activity of adenosine, and that's the neurotransmitter that makes us tired. And so this is where adenosine can cause a change in neurotransmitters like dopamine, acetylcholine, serotonin. It also increases muscle activity. So there have been studies where they found that people actually perform better at balance and athletic events when they've had some caffeine in their system, when they've had some coffee. It makes you feel relaxed, but yet alert, energetic. It relieves migraines. If you don't have the right setup, so, you know, if you get jittery, if you have anxiety, if you have stomach issues, or if it creates insomnia, then, you know, remember, go back to what we talked about earlier in this episode, which is, are you getting the right coffee? Is it healthy? Is there mycotoxins in the coffee? That means there's mold that's growing in it. Is there an imbalance in your neurotransmitters? Are you adding the L-theanine? Because that can be one of the most healthiest things you can do, is add the L-theanine into it. And then you need to add in the fats. We like bone broth, collagen peptides. You can do chocolate bone broth, collagen peptides. Makes your coffee nice and healthy. Add some mushrooms like lion's mane, and that should take care of everything. And it will keep you from needing that second cup when you crash at 10 o'clock. So if you have your first cup at 8 o'clock and then your second one at 10 because you need it, that's a totally different animal. So hopefully this is giving you some good insights. L-theanine, what it does is it increases the brainwaves of the alpha levels. The alpha, I've also seen studies where the beta brainwaves can be somewhat activated. And then it also helps with wakeful relaxation, enhanced creativity. It calms the neurotransmitters. So this is where you get more serotonin, more dopamine, more GABA. And it's been suggested to help with the attention circuitry. So it helps neurons from damage. And there's been studies with conditions like Parkinson's with L-theanine. So add about 100 milligrams every day to your coffee, and you'll notice you just do much better. You can add up to 200. These things are going to be really critical. So Cade, what do you think about that on coffee? What did I miss before we kind of jump into a definition of nootropics? And I'm going to do some rapid fire nootropics here.
Love it. I don't think we missed anything. We covered a lot of ground there. That was great. One of my favorite, you were mentioning some of your favorite coffees. One of the ones that, so Laird Hamilton, he's got the superfoods. He also he has his own coffee now. So you can get that same brand with with mushrooms blended into the coffee.
Yep.
I really like those. That's what I'm drinking today, actually.
Or do you have the focus? There's the alert. There's the.
I have two different ones, and I think it's I think the one that I'm using right now is Focus. It's the blue, the light blue color.
Yeah, the light blue. That's got the lion's mane in it. That's my favorite too.
Yeah, when I saw lion's mane on there, it's like, all right, this is the one.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so let's talk nootropics. So Diane, you asked earlier, what's the definition? Well, nootropics, actually, it's a term that was coined by Dr. Guardier. He's a Russian scientist who worked with Olympic athletes in the 1980s when, Russia was dominating things from a physical perspective. That's when the United States and Russia had some clashes, and it was interesting because is very competitive, not just in the military, but also in the Olympic arena. And what Dr. Guardier noticed is he noticed that when soldiers or when athletes use stimulants, especially like if you go back into World War II and you saw what the Nazi Germany did. Methamphetamines for soldiers was very common, but what you notice is, yes, the brain gets more alert and focused, but not smarter, and then it deteriorates the brain. So Dr. Guardier, he said, how can we need 5 things to meet the criteria of nootropics where we're actually enhancing the brain performance and where it's not diminishing returns. Because remember, anything we do at the clinic or at East West is we want to focus on residual results for our patients. And so hopefully what we shared with you on the coffee gives you some of the capabilities of creating residual results, because there's a time to drink it, there's a time not to drink it. And hopefully we shared that, but nootropics can even enhance it another level. And coffee by definition is a nootropic if you do it the right way. So number 1 is got to increase learning ability and memory. So how many of you love to learn? And I know if you're listening to this show, if you're on it live with us, I know you guys are voracious learners. So that's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is it's got to protect the brain against physical or chemical injuries. And that includes you can also include injuries from infections. So this is why when you go to a hospital and you have a concussion, in most Russian and even Eastern European hospitals, they give you 2 different peptide options. The doctors will give you Cerebral, which is peptides derived actually from pig brains, or you'll get a peptide called Cmax, and that's Cmax can be an injection or a nasal spray, but really powerful because they protect the brain from the inflammation. And there's actually been studies where they found that people have recovered from traumatic brain injuries much quicker by using these. And we've seen that with the SphenoCath, with the intranasal cellular treatments, where you'll see a massive diminishing of those symptoms of traumatic brain injury. We actually had an Olympic athlete who came down from Canada, and we treated her. She was actually trying to make the Olympics team, which she did, but she had 2 concussions in a row. And we did the SphenoCath, the intranasal cellular treatment, and then we did the Cmax for her and Cerebral, and she did phenomenal. So that's number 2. Number 3, it's got to assist the brain in operating under unsettling or stressful conditions. So how many of you would love to be able to function better when there's times of stress and uncertainty? And I think that's key. And Cade, how you've used a lot of nootropics, but what do you notice when you use nootropics, even though there's a lot going on, like you get 300 emails in one fell swoop?
Yeah, I think it just a lot easier capacity to intake information. I use Intergenius quite regularly. I used to do Siltep, which now it's Neurofuel, right?
Yeah.
I haven't used that it's been a while. But that was one of my main favorite ones. I remember I've done Aniracetam, like more the refined, like very, I look at those as like the intense ones. I do more the supplement blends that equal a nootropic. The Aniracetam just lit me up. Like it was like my brain was humming. It was, I think I needed to eat some food, or it just was like too intense, but it was still like really good from a mental clarity standpoint.
Yeah, the Aniracetam, one of the things, anytime you take racetams, and by the way, that, Cade brought up a good point. The racetams were, some of the first nootropics ever formulated by Dr. Guardier. But those racetams, you've got to take them with choline. Otherwise, it can just really overload your brain. Because acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that allows us to create memories and put in these long-term association tracks. And so if you don't have choline, then you're not going to have the capabilities of making acetylcholine. And so your brain can get really tired because it's trying so hard to create these neural pathways, but you don't have the raw material to do it. So criteria number 4 is it strengthens the efficiency of neural mechanisms in the brain. So, think about moving from focus to creativity, moving from relaxation to intensity. These are all things that need to happen when you can strengthen the efficiency of neural mechanisms, because it's one thing to be able to go meditate in the mountains and you have, just everything in life figured out. We know that doesn't last long, no matter where you're at or what your environment is. But one of the things that is constant is change. And so nootropics help you adapt to change. The fifth thing that they do is nootropics have to be free from the pharmacological side effects. And so this is where, there's modafinil is, it was initially formulated as a narcoleptic drug, but that can even have some side effects. And so it's got to meet all these criteria. So some of my favorite nootropics that don't get talked about as nootropics often, probably my number one for our patients when they get enrolled into our Accelerate Wellness program, one of the first things we want to do is reset the Hpa axis. And so that's where Epitalon is really key, because Epitalon works on the pineal gland. And so you get better melatonin production, and that melatonin is neuroprotective. But what Epitalon does as well is it works on the DMT. So melatonin is just a step down from DMT, which is, it almost gives your brain this nice psychedelic awakening when you're sleeping at night. And so then in the day, when your brain has been able to detox, because that's what sleep does, is it detoxes the brain, then your brain works so much better. So Epitalon's one of those. The other favorite of mine is Cerebral. Right now we can get Cerebral Pep. So it's a fragment. It's not the full chain. The FDA actually had put some of these peptides as biologic. If they have more than 50 amino acid chains, they've classified that as a biologic. And so Cerebral hit that. So it's been much more challenging to get. But we can get it in Cerebral Pep, and studies show that it helps recover post-stroke. It's really good for any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. And then in some of the memory and cognition scores went up by 20-30% by using Cerebral in it. Essentially is a scrub brush for the brain. And then if you have Alzheimer's or dementia, you'd add Thymosin beta-4 with Cerebral, and that helps balance the Th1 and Th2 immune response in the brain itself. So pretty phenomenal. Another favorite peptide is Dihexa. Dihexa has been shown to help with speech, with word recall, with focus, with memory, name recall. If you have a challenging time recalling names, get some Dihexa. You can put it right on your carotid artery, and it's a very powerful peptide. It actually was a lot of these peptides and nootropics. They came from research that was done that pharmaceutical companies never brought it to market because one reason or another, but it was initially studied as an ACE inhibitor. And they realized that it didn't really have the hypertensive impact that they wanted, but they found that it really turned on the brain of the people who used it. And so that's when they changed the course of it. Cmax, this is another nootropic that many of you have been on, really powerful for increasing the dopamine transmission and metabolism so you don't stay in that rut, but it helps with focus, but it also helps bring in different areas of the brain. So you can it works on the hippocampus for balance. It helps with strength. You can have higher intense workouts with Cmax. So it's a phenomenal one. And then the final one that we'll talk about is Selank. And Selank is one of my favorites because it works on the GABAergic receptors. It's antimicrobial. So it's something that we've used a lot with any kind of viral replication. But Selank is also been shown to help with creativity, with mood. It's an anxiolytic. So if you have any anxiety, Selank is your way to go. And then one more, I know we're kind of at the end of the show here, but the other one that I love is the RG3 Synapsin. And that one's got methylcobalamin, but it's also got nicotinamide riboside. So it's got the precursors for NAD. And that one is very neuroprotective, great for memory, but it also is like a jet fuel for the brain. So hopefully this has been interesting, but you add these in with some of your coffee. And what you'll notice is, the way that we experience life is all filtered through the hardware called our brain. And so, yes, your mindsets and the way you think about things are the most critical part of that. But if you want really healthy hardware for the software, for the higher level thinking that you're doing, the visualizations you're doing, hopefully with your mindset morning, what you'll find is that the nootropics just upgrade the way that your hardware functions, so that you can enjoy your life more, you can be more calm, yet more focused, you can be more intentional in what you're doing. And I think they are one of the best ways to enhance health and enhance your life. So get on some nootropics. If you guys have any questions about them, don't hesitate to get a consult set up with me. Maybe you could set that up in the show notes for those of you who are not in our programs. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone about nootropics, one of my favorite things. So
awesome. Oh, that was awesome, Regan. Thank you so much for providing some amazing content today. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. We will be back same time, same place next week, as well as tonight at 6 o'clock. We got a cooking class with Chef Hillary. You can register for that at acueastwest.com/cook. And so you can get on our website, register for that if you haven't already, and look forward to seeing you guys there and next week. See you, everybody.
Awesome. Bye-bye.